Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host. Today, we're talking about Invasion, the television series that recently concluded its 10-episode first season on Apple Plus. At Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter score is 47%, and the critics' consensus reads, Invasion attempts a slow burn, but inadvertently lets its tension completely fizzle out, with leaden pacing that will leave viewers impatient for the alien apocalypse to finally arrive. Well, that was unusually harsh, but as regular listeners know, here at Below the Line, we don't care about what the critics thought. The scope of this show was epic, and I'll be discussing that today with members of the art department. First, returning to the podcast and friend of the show, Dan Fisher. Dan, you're a New York-based props person and set dresser with 35 years of film experience under your belt, and you were working as a set dresser for Invasion. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Glad to have you here as well, Dan. Also returning to the show is Kerry Weeks. Kerry, you've been working art department gigs for more than 30 years, and you were the lead man on Invasion. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, Skid.
Getting the gang back together. Finally, though, joining us for the first time, Loren Weeks. Loren, you are Invasion's production designer. That's a role you've been doing for more than 20 years now. You're also Kerry's brother. Welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, this episode has been a long time coming. Back when we were doing the COVID episodes, Dan, you mentioned that you were working on this epic show for Apple. You couldn't share with it what it was then, but when this show came out and I saw your name on it, I really wanted to talk to you guys about all the work that went into this. Listeners, this is your warning. There will be big spoilers today for Invasion. But first, let's talk a little bit about how this show came together. I know Apple ordered the series back in January of 2019. When did each of you get involved? Loren, why don't you start us off?
I think I got a call like February or March of that year.
And that we are talking about almost 3 years ago, which even in terms of this production, that's a long time from order to actually getting on the air. So you got a call. And so tell me a little about how that went, what they were looking for and what they shared with you out the gate.
Well, I got a call from one of the executive producers, Amy Kaufman, who I have worked with for many years. We worked together on Gossip Girl for 5 years. And she was really pushing for me to come onto the show. I was at the time kind of sitting tight for another show that I was hoping to come back for season 2, but they weren't pulling the trigger on that. And this came along, and the scale of it and the fact that it was science fiction, which I am a big sci-fi fan myself and had not done science fiction yet, I jumped on this. I met with the showrunner. We really just chatted a lot about it. I had, I guess, 2 scripts and maybe a series outline. It's kind of typically what I get, and signed on.
Well, we'll talk more about how things came together in those early months. Kerry, Dan, when did you guys become involved?
Well, I guess it was about 2 months after Loren first got the call. That's usually how that falls into place. I think I was on Loren's previous show as well. Probably Dan and I both were. So it was just very convenient to roll right into that. And so it was early spring 2019. That seem about right, Dan?
Yeah, that seems right, because we were doing High Fidelity at that time when we were going to...
Oh, that's right. No, that wasn't a Loren show. That was...
and I haven't forgotten.
Well, neither have we.
Actually, I remember now. I started at the beginning of May of 2019. That's when I started. And I just finished a film called The Photograph. And yeah, Kerry, you guys were not, for whatever reason, the timing, whatever you were doing.
Timing didn't work out.
That other show.
Yeah, and the way it's been going, at least for me, since, I guess, late 2017 or early 2018, as regular listeners might know, I had health issues at the end of 2017. I had been prop master for the show The Americans, and then I had to leave the prop master business entirely when I had some heart issues. And eventually, Kerry hired me on during my first round of dealing with that to work as his set dressing shop foreperson. Then later, I had a heart transplant. And so since that first call from Kerry, I've worked usually pretty much whatever he's doing, I wind up working on to help do that aspect of it, the logistics part keeping track of things like time cards and all that stuff that Kerry has a lot on his plate to begin with. So a lot of what my job is to keep Kerry from being sidetracked with a lot of that kind of minutiae and who's driving which truck and what's picking up that. That leaves him a lot more free time to interact with the set dressers and so forth. But anyway, I bring that up just all because, a lot of times where Loren goes, Kerry goes. And a lot of times where Kerry goes, I go, not necessarily always. I'm working on something right now for Netflix because, I got a call to do something and we were between jobs and still waiting to start something this year. So timing is everything. And it's also nice to work with people you love and enjoy being with. And I certainly can say that about Kerry and Loren, and I enjoy their working methods. But at the same time, it's nice to sometimes get away from each other. I imagine as brothers, there is that dynamic where you love that chemistry you've had since birth, but at the same time, sometimes it's nice just to get out of each other's hair.
Well, it is an aside, but I'll bring it up now. I noticed looking at IMDb that Kerry, you're the younger brother, but it looks like your film career started a good 6 or 7 years before Loren's did.
Oh, you caught that, huh? Yeah, I like to say I taught Loren everything he knows, but that's not really, not really the case. But yeah, I did start in the film business before Loren. He was an architect at the time when I started, and then he transferred those skills to set design.
Loren, what motivated you to leave architecture to come into film?
Well, I was never really happy in architecture, I have to say. And I was actually looking for a way out. I went back to school part-time a little bit to study graphic design at Pratt Institute. So I was kind of open. And Kerry, when he got out of school, he moved here to New York and we became roommates. And he wanted to write scripts and make short movies. He says we talked about it, but I really have no recollection of that. But, who knows? I may have been drunk or something. I don't know. So we did. I said, why not? Neither one of us had been to film school. He was just starting in the business, but we did a couple of short films that did well in the festival circuit. And
that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I really decided, to get into production because I just wanted to make contacts so that he and I would do our scripts and films or whatever. But I PA'd for a while on commercials, and PA being a production assistant, for those who don't know the abbreviation. And then I got a job as an art department coordinator on David O. Russell's second film, I guess it is, after Spanking the Monkey, called Flirting with Disaster, working with a very wonderful production designer, Kevin Thompson, who's gone on to do really wonderful stuff. Judy Ree was our art director. She's now designing as well. And I discovered the art department and found a home. I had the skill set. It sort of was perfect for my kind of creativity, which is rather eclectic and confusing. So the rest is history.
I just want to tell a quick story about that David O. Russell film, Flirting with Disaster. There was some reshoots they had to do, and I'm not sure if this was because of Loren or not, but somehow I got called to be the lead man for the reshoots or some additional shooting that had to be done with that. And I'll never forget this because we were doing an in-prison dinner scene, and it had like all my childhood TV idols in there. There was Lily Tomlin, Alan Alda, George Siegel. Who else was there?
Mary Tyler Moore there?
Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, Mary Tyler Moore. Yes, it was amazing.
I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've gone back in a time machine and it's Friday night and I'm watching all my childhood TV pals here. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing experience.
That's to me the only time I ever get starstruck, really, is when I meet somebody exactly like that. From when I was a kid, like I one time met Gordon from Sesame Street. He played a judge on Law and Order. And you would think I was meeting, Laurence Olivier or something. But it was just, you're Gordon. You exist outside of the street.
All right, gentlemen. Well, jumping ahead and bringing us back to Invasion, let's talk first about what the plan was pre-COVID. Because early, mid-2019, we don't know that there's going to be this issue come 2020. And so you're planning what is an epic series, multiple continents. Loren, tell us a little more about what you were envisioning and sort of how things were coming together before we knew it was on the horizon.
Well, pre-COVID, we planned to finish, I think, by May of 2020, but by March of 2020, we were shut down. So that was the number one hiccup. Overall, I didn't know what I was getting into. They really didn't have it sort of sorted out as to how to do all the various countries. It's just complicated, these scheduling issues. And even pre-COVID, you've got directors doing multiple episodes. Each director did 2 episodes, except for our producer director, Jakob Vorbruggen. He did 4, 1 and 2, and then 9 and 10. So, it was really quite complicated and a bit overwhelming. At one point, I had 3 or 4 directors I was working with, because each episode had work in another country and that work was being pushed to a later date. I never quite got rid of any director, and they were still wanting to prep what they were doing in these foreign countries while I'm now working with directors here in the States trying to get their work done. So I was really feeling, that rubber doll figure that used to be where Mr. Stretch, where you pull them in all 4 directions. That's how I felt.
Stretch arm.
Yes, thank you. That's how I felt.
This is what I'm going to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you.
The 4 countries, by the way, the 3 other countries besides ours, so we're what? Morocco, Japan, and Great Britain, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now, Loren, I noticed on IMDb also that there are other production designers listed on this show, what I assume to be regional production designers. Is that typical for a show this large, or was that specifically because of COVID?
COVID had a big part in dealing with that, because we did have art departments set up in each of those locales. But with the advance of COVID, it became clear that travel may be restricted, and we weren't sure what was going on. It was also, just because I wouldn't know how much I could be there.
Now, I know that all of you are New York based. Was there a specific reason why the production was New York based, given the scope of what it was going to be? And in fact, there doesn't, that I recall, appear to be any New York specific filming in the project. But then, so why based in New York at all?
Who knows? They looked at Atlanta. I know that. I don't know where else they looked. In fact, they were, I think, planning to go to Atlanta and then changed their minds for whatever reason. And it was really after that I got the call. So I don't know why, because we did shoot New York, but it could have been outside Atlanta. It didn't need to be New York. I don't know. Tax credits.
Well, there were scenes of the family driving alongside, like crossing the bridge, and you saw the New York City skyline, and then the lights majestically just suddenly all start dropping out. And I think there is, I don't want to over talk my production designer, but I do think that that New York in general is a pretty versatile area to film.
It is.
I live in Rockland County, which is about 35 miles north of the city, and where we shot quite a bit of, it turns out, where we shot quite a bit of Invasion. And that's where we had done like the Oklahoma scenes, in downtown Haverstraw. And then other areas were farms and things like that. But then, within a certain amount of traveling, you could go out to Long Island and shoot there. Or you could do stuff in the city. And it was weird too, because we had production facilities, production office in Brooklyn, but we also had the stage out in deep into Long Island, and our set dressing shop was sort of at a halfway point in Long Island City, or was that? No, we were in Brooklyn, right? Yeah, we were in Brooklyn.
Long Island City. No, you're
Long
right.
Island City. That's right. We were on that sort of edge between them. I don't know. So I say, why not New York? And plus we got the.
I like that, Dan. Why not New York? Yeah.
That should be New York State's new slogan.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not New York?
In the words of our former president, what have you got to lose? But also, too, seriously, we do also have a very large labor pool here. So given the amount of work that had to be done on the sets that Loren designed and so forth, there's a lot of people that could fill those spots. But, Atlanta, is certainly still growing, but compared to the New York, production crews, we've got a lot more people at our disposal.
Well, that's true. We have such top-notch crews here. We really do. The talent pool we have to draw upon is fantastic.
Did it start late 2019 or early 2020 when you guys actually started filming?
October 2019.
And so you filmed up until March. So you got about 5-6 months under your belt. What scenes or locations were the focus of those 5 or 6 months?
All the stuff we were shooting in New York.
Yeah, so like, well, like Dan said, we did a lot of stuff up in Rockland County, which we played as Oklahoma, the cornfields and small town Oklahoma. And
we did a lot of stage work here. We had, in terms of sets we built, we had the JAXA Flight Control Center. JAXA was our fictional version of JAXA, the Japanese Aeronautic Space Administration. So we had that. We had the shuttle. We built the shuttle for those scenes. We built Mitski's apartment, which is a Japanese apartment. What else did we do, guys?
Well, we did the White Room, which was the entrance into the shuttle.
Right at the tower. Yeah.
And we started some interiors of the Malik House.
Right.
Yeah.
Which the location was out in Long Island. But because we had these special...
No, that was up north as well.
Right. Sorry.
You're right. Was, I forget where.
Around New Rochelle.
That's right. New Rochelle.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, we did that huge crash scene in the streets up there in New Rochelle, outside the Malik House, where we we made it look like the whole street got like torn up and cars were on fire and all that. Yeah.
Right. And we built part of the Malik House. We built part of the ground floor, which had like the TV family room and the kitchen breakfast area because of the special effects we wanted to do there. When the unknown, whatever it was, alien ship or whatever was passing by and everything started to vibrate, we had to control that. We had to be able to control the walls and everything. So we built that.
But yeah, going back to the COVID thing, I remember working on it. 95% of the work I did, by the way, even though I'm listed as a set dresser, I touched very few sets. I did 95% of my work was sitting at a desk, orchestrating pickups, returns, crew, who's going out where. And that was actually a pretty challenging job behind the desk because we had so many different locations spread out.
Yeah.
Rockland County, Nassau County, Long Island, Brooklyn, whatever else. Just keeping track of what's going to the right place and the people going to the right place at the right time. That can be pretty complicated. And if I've made a mistake, then I've sent a truck all the way up to Rockland County that turns out has like maybe an item that really needs to get back to Long Island by the end of the day because it shoots the next day.
You're talking half a day wasted. Yeah, I was always like telling Dan, please make sure everything gets to where it goes. And a little life hack as a lead man, if you get the chance, hire a former prop master to be your shop foreman because they fucking rock when you need shit done like that. So,
well, former prop masters have spent their entire lives being yelled at for mistakes. So, usually in front of a crowd of their peers. So it really sort of makes you really want to double check your work at all times is all I can say. Not that I was infallible. I certainly set up a few wrong chairs here and there, but overall,
I think so. Yeah, it went flawless.
Kept a list, by the way. But I remember, every time we had to go to a location or the stage, it was an hour drive.
Yeah.
We were all over the place. And I remember one day I had to go to 2 locations in the stage, starting from the offices in Steiner Studio in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I spent maybe a total of an hour checking in on these 2 locations in the stage, and it took me 4 or 5 hours to drive it all.
I mean, you were talking about how we have so much stage space here in New York, but the truth is because we're in streaming mania right now, I'm not sure how much was available for rental, and certainly for the amount of time we would need to have it.
We were very lucky to get what we got out there in Bethpage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that made it hard for Carrie and myself, I'm sure.
Everybody. It was...
Yeah. But I mean, just in terms of getting the personnel we needed, part of my job was when we needed day players to call the local 52 and try to get people to work on our show, which at first would be like, oh yeah, I'm available. And you go, well, you have to go out to Bethpage, Long Island. And it'd be like, well, I live in New Jersey. Screw that.
Yeah.
That happened a lot.
I had a couple of department heads I was interviewing for it, and they passed because, it's too far to drive. And, 15 years ago, the job came along, you took it because you didn't know when the next, there wasn't that, we had a handful of TV shows and a few movies every year.
And then one last thing, going back to the COVID question you're asking, I just recall sitting at my desk in like January, and that's when, we first started hearing about COVID, and then it was like this storm cloud definitely heading in our direction. So it really became at that point like a countdown as to what day will be our day before we bug out.
Yeah.
And I certainly remember that day of bugging out.
Right.
Yeah, that was a very memorable.
Oh, yeah. Remember they sent us home saying it'll be 2 weeks.
Now, you guys listed a lot of things that were shot in the New York area. Had you completed all of that, most of that, or only some of that before COVID shut you down?
Most of it.
I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel that we got most of episodes 1 and 2 in the can. I think we were on to 3 and 4 at that point.
I think we were on to 3 and 4, and I think we had almost finished that.
So actually, I'm going to revise that. I think we're about halfway through because you know what? We had 5 and 6. We had the big house with the creature chasing everybody.
But what I remember too is that the big sort of field hospital that we wound up building.
Right.
Originally, that was supposed to be an IKEA. And the whole thing was that people would be taken care of in rooms that were like those sample IKEA rooms, like a bed and a little dresser and so forth. And we had this whole location deal with the IKEA in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And I think we were getting ready to invade that IKEA.
That was going to be a huge setup. That was like that was an invasion. That was going to be an invasion. Yeah.
And then we got the word, we're not going into IKEA. Not only that, we're shutting down for 2 weeks, as Loren said, and it wound up being more than that. And they wound up rewriting it so it was no longer an IKEA.
Funny last story. I mean, the last set we did do, though, Skid, before we shut down, was a field hospital that was sort of an impromptu field hospital that was set up in some strip mall that was just supposed to be somewhere outside the city, right? So we had army trucks and first aid tents and all this stuff set up, and everyone in the town is driving by going, "Is this for that COVID thing?" Everyone was sure that this was the beginning of the the pandemic, that everyone was going to end up in that hospital tent that we set up.
I remember when we were dressing that set, we were about finished with it, and I picked up the New York Times, and on the cover of the New York Times was kind of a field hospital set up where the cruise ships were.
Right.
And it was like, oh my God, this is what we just did. Anyway, yeah, it was a little bit eerie.
And so when COVID became real and we went to indefinite shutdown, what changes did you see? Adjustments to the script and the schedule? How did the production react to COVID? And give me a sense of what that process was like for all of you.
I don't think in terms of the script, there were really any changes to the story. It had more to do with just the logistics and how many extras we could have on a set at any given time, how many crew members could be there at any given time. Definitely changed the schedule because by recollection, guys, we were only allowed like one crew on a set at a time. Typically when we're building a set, it's a clusterfuck, it's like everybody's in there. You've got scenics and construction and set dressers and people wanting to rehearse, for God's sakes, things like that.
Stunts people,
right? They want to get in there and do their rigging. Special effects wanting to get in there and do their rigging, but they wouldn't allow us to do that. So it really affected our ability to get a set ready.
I do think, though, that the scale of what we were doing shrunk down a little bit. When we came back, we had fewer large locations. Like we had right before we went on our COVID break, we were scheduled to do this huge IKEA thing that was going to be a refugee center. Yes, thank you, Loren. We ended up going to an abandoned or an empty location for that. That's college or campus that was up there.
It was actually a conference center.
Oh, that was it, a conference
right.
center.
And
yeah.
we created like a small community college look to it.
Right. They did tailor the stuff, I think, to kind of protect us a bit more so that we weren't.
That's true.
Out in we were more in an envelope of our own making at that point.
That's a good point, Kerry, because it wasn't just that. It was that nobody wanted us. It was like, you want to do what? You want to bring how many people in here? It did. You're right. It did affect us in that regard. We had to think differently about our locations.
As something of a grunt's eye view of it all too, what I remember, first of all, is how during that shutdown, There was all kinds of mixed messages or various messages that we were either overhearing or were being imparted to those of us who are crew people and prop people and so forth. And the thing was going to be like, well, when you get back, there's going to be all these restrictions. You're going to have to work in the restrictions. Production knows this. They will have to accommodate the restrictions. And that's just the way life is going to be in production from now on ad infinitum. And I think that on Invasion especially, that was one where when we did come back, everybody took it very, very seriously. I mean, we still do, but what I've seen in the X number of months since we've returned is a slow amount of laxity, depending on which production you're on. Some productions have taken things less seriously than others. But with our show coming back, it was really, at least at first, I remember like the COVID team coming with 6-foot-long sticks with tennis balls on each end.
That's right.
And when
I still got the bruises. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They were rough with those sticks.
They would hold the pole between them 6 feet. And I'm really surprised nobody ever grabbed one of those sticks.
Oh my God, I feel so sorry. I felt so sorry for those PAs having to do that. The amount of dirty looks they got from people.
If you come near me with that stick, I swear I'll shove it up you.
I think now that we've got Omicron and all the other variations that have yet to come, I think there's being a swing back to, oh yeah, we really do have to take this seriously. We're not out of the woods.
But Dan, that also reminds me, again, you were asking how it affected things. It became very difficult to have any kind of, film people. I mean, we're always talking between the trades. Like our department has to coordinate with the construction. We have to coordinate with set dressing. We have to coordinate with the visual effects and special effects and the stunt people and all this. And we're used to just gathering around and talking. And now we had to do it 6 feet apart, wearing masks, and you couldn't hear anybody. It's like, everything, it's like, it made the job all that much harder to do.
And when you have the air filters going, those large, it's like you're on an airport tarmac.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating.
Yes.
It still is sometimes.
Yes. But we've gotten lax. I think COVID fatigue, and we've all experiencing it. Now you do start to see it, be more careful. People are very wary of the Omicron.
So I want to follow up on what you described, that sort of surreal sense of the things you were designing for the show, these field hospitals or refugee camps, how it seemed to parallel in some ways, especially during those early days, what we were anticipating with COVID. Talk to me more about, even before COVID, sort of the challenges of designing and decorating for the apocalypse.
It's the interesting thing about the way we approach the story was approached, in that unlike so many alien invasion movies, it's all about the action and the fighting between humans and the invading extraterrestrials and the destruction. And we didn't have that much like that. Our story followed the lives of our characters and being caught up in this thing they didn't understand, and no one knew what was going on for, half the series, right? Or so. So the apocalypse look really didn't happen until the much later episodes. Even then, we didn't see that much of it. I mean, I think probably the London stuff had the most kind of biggest visuals for that. So I think for us, I don't know, for me, I didn't find it that different than a lot of what we've done. It was really about the characters. So you're designing for the characters. The difference, I think, is that our characters were all on the move. So they're going into locations that have had nothing to do with them in their prior lives. So it was different in that regard.
It was fun dressing some of the sets for taking, well, like you said, the conference center that we turned into a refugee center, but it was supposed to look like, in its previous incarnation, it was a community college. So it was interesting to take these spaces and change them not once, but twice. Usually we go into a space and we make it look like X, but this time we, went into a space and it was once X, but now we've changed it to Y, and that was kind of fun.
Right. And then add the layer of the refugee,
right.
With the makeshift triage area and how people were camped out in rooms. Yeah. And how people were camped out with their personal belongings and grocery sacks and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, in talking about specific locations, you alluded to it earlier, but I wanted to confirm all of the Oklahoma stuff, the cornfields and the Sam Neill portion during that first episode, You did that all in outside New York, in upstate New York.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Rockland County. That's not really upstate. I mean, anything north of New York City, people tend to call upstate.
Oh my God, it was so far.
It was what, like 45 minutes? My God.
It's frigid up there, the great north, the great white north.
As a daily commuter, it was actually often fun for me to listen to my cohorts bitch and moan about having to go all the way up to Rockland County and then back to their safe abodes in Brooklyn. But,
anything above exit 1 off the Palisades.
Haverstraw, New York played the downtown, whatever Oklahoma town that was supposed to be. Idabel. And Haverstraw is just one of those towns that time just hasn't really changed a whole lot, I think. I mean, not to diminish any of Loren's work or Kerry's work, but I think a lot of the elements are just kind of there, have been there from the 1940s or 50s on.
Yep.
And then, we've got farmlands and stuff. I think any city, if you go out 30 miles from any city boundary, you start to come across farms or barns or whatever, even New York.
Well, taking a completely different tact from the New York shooting, talk to me about doing the forward operating base in Morocco, which is supposed to be Afghanistan.
Yeah, that was a little daunting since we had nothing to work up from other than an empty desert. And there are a lot of restrictions in terms of what you can bring in terms of military equipment and the like. You have to put in your request very, very early. Basically, I laid that out to address certain beats in the script that the director, in a certain way he wanted to do it. So, first I laid it out as a plan, and then we created a 3D model, and then I had them walk through it. And that's basically how that opening scene was shot, which was very cool. I hope we got it right. We did have military advisor, and we just did a whole hell of a lot of research on what forward operating bases look like.
Loren, you never got to travel to that location, right? There's no scouting for you there.
No, I scouted Morocco.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was there twice.
Did you make those scouts before COVID? In other words, this was planned, but you hadn't shot any of it yet when the COVID shutdown happened.
We started shooting. We shot episode 2. That's where the forward operating base first showed up. The little market, school, and then we shot, I don't remember. Sorry, we did shoot 2, and then I think they went back to shoot the remaining work. And by that time, we had a production designer helping me out on the work we did there.
The stuff for some of the later episodes was delayed, but not that early work.
No, not the early work.
Was there any of that desert work, or when they have the alien encounter, any of that got brought back to the States, or that was all just done over in Morocco?
That was all done in Morocco.
I mean, I do think it's really cool, both as a viewer and as somebody who worked on it. I can't think of any other television show certainly, that was as ambitious, internationally ambitious as this. I know that Game of Thrones would do various portions of their shows in different areas of the world. That's about the only thing I think that could rival it in terms of having setups, so spread out across the globe. And I think it was to the benefit of the show. I think that is one element of the show that worked, I think, pretty well, was that the stories did get to be seen from these different perspectives, and each one of them were distinct. And that made it a more interesting show for me to watch.
And you did get the sense of that this was a worldwide event as well. So it definitely it was effective in that.
And it wasn't up to the good old Americans to be the ones necessarily to take out the bad guy aliens through their mastery of a Mac laptop computer or their sudden ability to fly a spaceship. An Independence Day reference for you kids out there.
Well, I'm cycling through the overseas work. Talk to me about the work in Manchester and London.
Yeah, and that was after we came back from COVID. So a lot of that work had passed on to the production designer in the UK.
How in conjunction were you, Loren, with that designer? I mean, in terms of having your vision be shared by him, how much independence did he have from you, or how cohesive was it?
He had a fair amount of independence. It just needed to be that way, because we were still so much work we were doing here. You just can't do it all. It's simultaneous, so.
And the hospital interiors, was that all on location?
That was, yeah.
In London or?
London. They were in London. Yeah, the where the kids' bus crashed was outside of Manchester. It was an old abandoned quarry, which was extremely cool place. The scouting for that was just so much fun. I got to tell you, we were wandering all over the British countryside, and I guess this was December. I think I was there, so it was cold, but really great. My cinematographer and I were on the crawl for the best pint of Guinness. So we were hitting all the pubs. I actually found the best pint when I was flying home, and I was routed through the Dublin airport, and they actually have Guinness dispensaries. People were lining up to get their Guinness, and oh my God, that was so good. I took a picture and sent it to Tim Ives, our cinematographer.
That's a different kind of scout.
Yeah.
Also talk to me, though, about the split of the work in Japan. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of the major sets, the control room, the space shuttle itself,
Yep.
and even one of the apartments you built in New York. So what did that leave for Japan, and what were you looking for there?
Well, it was location work, the exteriors, and we did not have a production designer there. We had an excellent art director. She was absolutely amazing. So we did just locations there mostly. We like the temple that I think appears in 9 or 10, a lot of the Tokyo streets and everything.
And so then bringing us home to the sets that you did build here, why didn't they find, I don't know, I guess you would have had to build that control set no matter where you were. Is that right? We don't have access to something
Correct.
that's set up like that in advance.
Correct. So. I think there was originally when we started off, there was plans to do even more of the built sets here in New York. And with COVID, when we came back, people couldn't travel. The talent, there were restrictions for traveling. And so there were certain things that got moved. For instance, we did a whole set design for the control room at the radio observatory. And then they decided to do it in the UK because bringing all those people here didn't make sense. So that's how COVID affected us. Things that was planned to be here then got moved to the countries they were scripted for.
To your point, because we did have different restrictions, even as far as getting around and where people could get in and out, and just how COVID was affecting different areas at the time.
When we scouted, I was in Japan twice scouting, and then we did a third scout, which we had to do remotely from New York. They walked around with a tablet and Zoomed it. And then the director actually directed those episodes remotely as well.
Well, on the sets that you did do here, when you talk about things like the space shuttle and the flight control room, in some ways it feels like the real locations are fairly well documented. Talk to me about the sort of creative process for both production designer, then Kerry, what you're doing as far as decorating these sets that represent established places.
You mean like the flight control room?
For example.
Yeah, which are not really, we did research to see what they look like in real life. And for the shuttle, we did research on what SpaceX was doing, and some of the other companies that are still working in that area. But, it's all pretty much fiction. We wanted the whole thing to feel grounded. So we weren't into doing really huge techno sets. For instance, our our flight control room was based on a real flight control center. But then, I took artistic license because I wanted to make it a little more dramatic, and to do that with common materials that you would use. If you look at the ceiling in that thing, those are slatted ceilings, and they just turned out, I was really pleased with the way it looked. It just gives a lot of drama to that room without trying. And I think that was the bane of Kerry and Dan's existence, that ceiling.
That was an endeavor. It was also expensive. That was like over $100,000 for that ceiling. Not to
Kerry, we don't talk about money. It actually would have cost more to build it. I did a ceiling like that, of that scale in Harlem's Paradise, Luke Cage,
Right,
remember?
Yeah.
We built that all on the floor. We did, and then we lifted it up, and anyway, so that was pretty damned expensive.
I think that Apple came out with a new phone around that time, so I think they managed it.
No, it was fun doing that ceiling, and it's always good when you have a problem like that needs solving. It was fun doing that set. It was the kind of set that you could just dress forever. It would just keep taking stuff, and you could keep layering, and it was well done. I just had a top-notch crew out there to put that in. So I was disappointed though, going back to the sets, the things that we didn't do. I was both relieved and disappointed. We mentioned how the whole huge IKEA refugee center set got eliminated and something else came in its place, which was a little easier to do. But then also that radio control center was going to be a really big dress as well.
Yeah.
We were going to take over the offices at Grumman Studios up above and do a big conversion up there. And that was another thing that we were marshaling the forces for right before the shutdown.
Yeah, I was sorry to lose that set. I was looking forward to doing that one.
I was too. And there was some great flooring choices that went in there. We had like a different color flooring for each room. And,
right, which basically was, again, from my research of one we had visited in Japan, just trying to bring in that sort of design sensibility.
It's all derivatives, kid.
It's always the curse of the set dresser and obviously of the designer too, that you do put all of this work into it and weeks of effort and who knows what the money is and so forth. But then you just have to leave it to the shooters and hope that whatever effort you've put in gets represented to some degree or another. And unfortunately for us on that regard, I mean, much of the show, certainly the American portions, the family portions, took place at nighttime. So, when watching the show, it's like there are things I know that we did that I just really didn't get to see a whole lot of, because it's especially in the house in, I think, episode 8, when the aliens attack the family in the house. A lot of it is just, it's wrapped in darkness, for a reason. It's a nighttime scene and you don't have a ton of lights on in the house, or that wouldn't make any sense. But, it's like, oh, golly, all of that work. And I'm seeing just bits and pieces of things, whatever the camera shows me. It is what it is. That's always been the way.
It is what it is. And, there are times when the set dressing and all that you shouldn't be paying that much attention to it. It should just feel right.
Oh, come on. That's what it's about.
It does, coming from a former prop master perspective, I do know that it is helpful to the actors to just have that level of, if you can afford a level of detail where you make a house feel real and lived in and all that, that helps them believe. And then when we watch them, we believe. So it doesn't diminish what we do. I just, of course, want to see everything we do because it's...
Yes, I completely agree. Listen, what I said doesn't mean I don't want to see it on camera. I do, but,
We're slaves to the story. We have to tell the story.
That's a good point, Dan, that it also, even if we only see a fraction of the work we do, it does sell the belief for the actors when they walk in and you have a completely decorated house, even though sitting on a sound stage, you got the little Post-its and refrigerator magnets and the dirt, leftover food stains on the gas stove and all that kind of stuff. So,
I'm a big believer in the layers and the detail. Even if people don't really acknowledge it in a conscious level, they acknowledge it, I think, on an unconscious level. And the more a set looks real, then the more they can buy into the story. But if it feels a little bit phony, maybe they can't put their finger on why, but it undermines the credibility of the story.
Right. If everything looks like it just came off the shelf of the store, everything's clean and bright and unsmudged, we know it. We sense it.
What I tell every new scenic department and set dressing department I work with, nothing should look new unless it's scripted as new. I tell them all the time, it's like, take the shine off of it. Take that newness off of it. It doesn't have to be looking like shit, but it shouldn't look brand new because, unless it's scripted, unless that's a plot point.
And most of us most of us don't live our existences as designers or decorators. Our framed photographs on the wall are sometimes a little off kilter. Sometimes we put things down that don't quite make sense, but they make sense to us.
Not on my sets.
Probably not in Loren's house either. I do want to dive a little deeper onto that episode, Home Invasions, actually episode 6, where it's all set in the house and the aliens are coming after the people. As you mentioned earlier, Loren, you built some of this on stage to accommodate what sound like some special effects. I'm curious about that process of accommodating other departments, and also if there's any accommodation for what visual effects is going to have to do.
Well, sure. That house, we built the entire interior of that house. It's one of those cases where you read the script and it was very, very specific. This happened and they see it from this angle, and this, it's a real jigsaw puzzle to put that together. And initially they wanted to shoot it on location, which I'm not saying I'm smarter than the producers, but my gut told me we will not be shooting this on location. And sure enough, we ended up building it. And we built the ground floor and the second floor as one set. We built the attic as another set and the basement as a third set so that we were able to accommodate each and every moment in that script.
And then the actual house was shot up in, what town was that? Not Haverstraw. It was...
That was around Harriman Park, wasn't it? That was...
Yeah.
And again, the floor plan of the house was actually based on a previous house we had signed off on, but then that changed and we ended up going to this one. Sometimes you just, you lose a little bit of control, but, I think it all worked out.
Yeah, I think that's one where there's not a lot of exterior shots. And
No.
to Dan's point earlier, they're at night. And so the fact that there's a shift in the floor plan, but was originally meant to match a floor plan, you're saying, for a different house.
It was originally designed for a different house. Yeah. So the exterior, you're trying to acknowledge what it looks like from the outside on the inside. But you're right. It was dark and that was very forgiving.
And monsters are attacking human beings. So, who has time to pay attention to the floor plan?
Well, as we often say, look, if people are picking up on this, then we've got bigger problems than this.
Sloatsburg is where the house was. And I got such a kick out of going up there, and I had a crew up there addressing the exterior of the house and the porch where some stuff took place and explaining how, okay, so the people go in here and then they come out at the house down at Bethpage, Long Island. And then we see them go up the stairs and then they run down into the basement and then they crawl out this window over here in Sloatsburg. So it's fun.
When a set is going to be destroyed is too large a word, right? Because it's so much more controlled than that. But there's going to be this destruction in the set. How does that affect, Kerry, how you set decorate? Like what you actually put in a thing? Or is all of this coordinated with stunts and special effects and visual effects ahead of time? Just make sure everybody's on the same page.
Well, it's a lot of discussion with stunts and special effects, and it usually means multiples of stuff because when things are supposed to get destroyed or they fall over, you have to be prepared that you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So you may just have to replace Humpty Dumpty with a whole new settee or something. And it's a process, it's a lot of back and forth with the set decorator and Loren as the designer and what we can do. And then also what the AD has planned in terms of how many takes they can do and how much time they want to devote to it. Somehow it all there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of, I don't know what we're doing. I'm hoping someone will. Usually that's what I say. People come to me with a lot of questions like my crew, well, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? And I'm like, I have no idea. That's all above my pay grade. But let's just hold on. They'll figure it out eventually.
And I usually say, go talk to Kerry.
Thanks. That's where that comes from.
Well, I'm sure that all four of us here have at some point or other on a location encountered somebody coming up to us, like the homeowner, saying, I had no idea it took so many people and so much time to do this. And they're only really looking at what's happening with the shooting crew on that particular day or the dressing crew a couple of days in advance. But before any of us get to that location, there's a gazillion phone calls and emails and so many audibles called on a daily basis. Oh, we're gonna use this floor, covering. Oh, we can't get that in time because of COVID problems. We're gonna have to go with something else, or this person is sick, or oh, my entire my truck drivers are both down with COVID, or whatever else. There's a million little reasons why before everything happens and is shot. There's a million little decisions that get changed and constantly counterchanged before you get to that point where, pencils down, eyes up. It's time to commit to the camera.
Yeah, and it's all because some writer put it on paper. Yeah. I just heard this funny story, Skid, that I want to share because it kind of relates to this. Ray Fisher, another set dresser and sometimes green person.
Not related me, by the way.
No, yeah, no relation to Dan. Was working on a movie called You Got Mail, Nora Ephron movie, You Got Mail. And there is the opening scene has this letter which flies through the air and goes through windows and flies through branches and trees and goes in through the window and floats and then lands on the bed or something like that. And there's this whole elaborate opening sequence. And Ray Fisher said he'd been practicing for days with moving the branches just in time for the letter to come through, and the day comes to shoot this, and they're at it all day long as these things take. It's very complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of everything has to go exactly right to get the one take. They're at it all day long, and Nora Ephron, who never learned Ray's name, just said, "Leaf Man, yeah, Leaf Man, go slower with the branches." Anyway, she finally says, "I had no idea this was going to take all day. If I had known that, I'd have just written something else."
There's always that feeling too that you get when you do put all this work into prep and you're getting everything lined up and set up and people, booked and so forth. And then you get those blue pages where it says scene omitted.
Yeah.
It's halfway between anger, like, screw those guys. I put all this work in and now they're, but on the other hand, it's relief too.
Yep.
It's like, don't have to do that now.
And there's a question that I always have to bite my tongue on because it's not my place to ask. But when I see these really elaborate things that are written in, I want to go to the writer or the director or the executive producer and say, how married are you to this? Because this is going to be a nightmare to pull off. So if it's just a whim, speak up now and let's come up with something else.
For me, the frustrating thing is when I read a scene and it's got all this stuff in it and you realize it really is not contributing to the story. We were tight on money and you're going to drop $30,000, $40,000 on set dressing. I won't name names in this, invasion, but, and you're going, this is never going to make it into the final cut. I just know it's never going to make it in the final cut. And then sure enough, it doesn't make it in the final cut. And all that aggravation, all that money we spent,
all those man hours, and you just know, we know from experience, watching stuff and having read this stuff before and, seeing it produced, that ultimately, because they always have more material than they need, right, for the hour. So you can tell what's going to end up on the cutting room floor.
But hey, I'm grateful for the work.
Always grateful for the work.
Always grateful for the work.
Grateful or not, let's give me some sense of your impressions. You put a ton of effort into this, both what makes it on the screen, what doesn't make it on the screen. And then the reception is not perhaps what you might hope, or are you able to separate from what people see in the show, knowing that your work is still there and something to be proud of?
I'm always disappointed because you do want the show to be watched. You want it to be good. Yeah, I get over it quickly, but yeah, initially, yeah. If I read Rotten Tomatoes, I'm like, oh, well, damn. So yeah, you put a lot of effort into it and you hope it's going to be seen. But so yeah, Rotten Tomatoes didn't care much for Invasion, but personally, I'm very proud of the work that this department did, and everybody who was involved in it did amazing work. I'm very, very proud of it. So fuck them.
I don't think the problem with the show is any of the work that we did. I'm proud of how it looks. I'm proud to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And we had sort of an impromptu text line amongst the set dressing department. We all were like, "Oh, this isn't half bad." So we we all enjoyed it.
Well, to be truthful but as tactful as I can be, I didn't expect the critics to love this. But then again, my taste in movies is I can be kind of highfalutin in my taste for movies. I'm not a big comic book movie guy. I'm not a big action movie guy in general. I do like an emphasis on character, which was something I thought was really good about this show, was that it wasn't going to be just about the bang, bang, boom, boom. It was going to be about examining the lives of people and how they react to this terrible, terrible tragedy. Did the show succeed in examining those lives to the satisfaction of both critics and audience? I guess according to Rotten Tomatoes, the answer is no, it didn't, for whatever reasons. I thought it was going to be a bigger sort of, part of the zeitgeist and conversation. I have no idea how ratings are kept for this stuff, but I expected it to make sort of a bigger public splash than it seems to have. I don't really hear people talking about it the way they talked about Squid Game, or the way they're talking about Don't Look Up right now, or whatever. And maybe that's because maybe Apple TV doesn't reach as many viewers as Netflix. I don't know what the reason, but I was disappointed in that. I'd hoped more people would have watched it.
Well, you know what, Dan? It did get picked up for season 2.
There you go.
Apple also didn't care what the critics thought. That
Yeah.
I read soon after that it was renewed for more. So
I have to say that from personal anecdotes, I mean, I know several people who watched it and really liked it. I enjoyed it. You know, I was a pretty harsh critic, but, you know, I thought it came off really well.
So what talk is there about season 2? Loren, I imagine we'll start that conversation with you before Kerry and Dan hear about it, but your thoughts about going back?
Well, I don't know where they are on it right now, or where it's going to shoot. As we pointed out, you know, we could have shot this anywhere. It didn't have to be in New York, and it is an international show. So I really don't know anything beyond that.
Well, if you did go for it, Kerry and Dan, they coming along. You don't have to tell them now, but
yeah, thanks. You put me right on the spot there.
You are being recorded too long.
You know what, Kerry and his crew, I want them on every show I do. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work out. You know, like right now, we're not going to be working together on my current show, but I trust Kerry's judgment so much and his creativity. And there are certain things I know I can just say, Kerry, will you please make this work? You know, and he's going to, and he pulls together a wonderful crew every time. You know, I just really value him, and you too, Dan.
No, you guys are great. I'd love to work with you on every job until I retire in a couple of years. I got to be on my good behavior, though, I guess.
All right. Well, together or separate, you guys are welcome back on the show as well. It's been fun talking to you guys today. Thanks so much for being here on Below the Line.
Thank you. It's fun.
Listeners, I hope you're enjoying Season 10. Our Oscar coverage will start in March, but I think these episodes will keep you entertained until then. If you're new to the podcast, I'd encourage you to check out our catalog. It's easy to peruse past episodes at the website, belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. We're also on IMDb, so you can cross-reference the film credits of my guests. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and rate us if you like what you hear. If you've got questions or comments, you can send email to skid, S-K-I-D, at belowtheline.biz. If you're on Facebook, you can find photos and other behind-the-scenes materials at Podcast Below the Line. And finally, you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Pod Below the Line. Thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Loyal listeners, you are much appreciated. If you're enjoying the season, tell your friends. We'll be back again next week. You guys, I have sirens for a minute. Sorry, that might come through, so give me 1 second.
They're coming for you, Skid.
The cops are going to be surrounding you in a moment saying, please come out of the blanket room.
You were behind those blankets. You matched the description.